2021 is finally here, and we're hoping to live long and prosper. We'll see how the year turns out, but one thing that I'm using to distract myself is a new show with Star Trek Discovery as we talk about Season 1 on episode 91 of the podcast. Cue the music. Welcome, everyone, to the Entertainment Buffet podcast. I am one of your hosts, Brandon Prosek. Jessica Kwazz is still away for a little bit, working on some things. And in the interim, I'm going to be having guests over the next handful of episodes. Today, we're going to be talking about Star Trek Discovery Season 1. I have two guests with me. One who is a lifelong Star Trek, full-on Trekkie fan, and someone else who's like myself, which seen some things, but not converted to Trekkieism yet. With me is Monica Burns and Matthew Burns. How you guys doing today?
Good.
Pretty good.
So before we get started, like most podcasts do, please share, like, subscribe, leave a comment on Apple, all the things, to support us on Spotify or YouTube or Apple, wherever you are listening to us today. We would really appreciate it. And you can find Entertainment Buffet on YouTube, at Entertainment Buffet on Instagram and Twitter. But we're going to be talking about Star Trek Discovery Season 1. That's available on CBS All Access, which I often forget is a streaming service in itself. But let's go ahead and introduce who we have with us today. And we're going to each go over our general Star Trek experience before we jump into Season 1. Monica, why don't you go ahead and tell us kind of your Star Trek experience over the years. How much have you seen?
I would describe myself as a tud. Like, I'm a Trekkie under duress. Because I grew up with a traumatic Star Trek exposure. My brother always tortured me with it, like, even before that, aliens were kind of iffy for me. He would, like, wear the E.T., like, an E.T. puppet that was, like, straight from Disney. So it was, like, real nice and, like, hide underneath my bed and, like, terrify me with it. And then there was, like, the Ferengi and there was Worf, and it was just too much. And he'd scare me with it. And then Matt introduced me to... He just... I mean... It's a big part of Matt's experience, so it came up a lot. So we needed to watch it. It's what needed to happen. And what did you introduce me to? You tried with the movies, and I was just not having it.
The J.J. Abrams movies?
The original
series.
Movies.
Oh! The original,
like, First
Shatner
Contact.
movies.
He's like, this one's good!
Well, no, I tried first... Yeah,
I'm telling you, this one's good!
I did try some of the Next Generation movies. I tried introducing her to First Contact, and she watched the first 15 minutes, then predicted the ending and fell asleep, and it pissed me off. She was right.
Predicted the ending, fell asleep.
Yeah.
I've seen enough.
And then I woke up and criticized it.
So, original movies didn't work.
Yeah, I mean, so that wasn't a negative experience for me. It just wasn't, but then I saw the J.J. Abrams movies, and they're a lot of fun. They were aesthetically pleasing, they were fast, and, it was showing a different perspective on Star Trek. And then, because I think at the time I hadn't considered that a thing, like a intellectual property like that can have different voices.
Sure.
I always think that they kind of go towards a singular voice. Anyway, so that happened, and then that made me more open to when Matt was talking more about, like, Deep Space Nine and why that one's different, because I always complained about how idealistic and, like, utopian Star Trek is, and I I don't like that because it doesn't describe real life. You know, just because you are in the future does not make life any easier. It does not make humanity any easier to deal with. Like, we're all still in the pits one way or another. And that's just not how I think life in a fucking submarine in space. It's not. It breaks the verisimilitude for me. So, that was the thing that I always talked about. And then Matt was like, but this one's different, man. And so that's exactly how he talks. And so he was totally right. He showed me Deep Space Nine, and I liked it. He has a abridged cut, like a watch list that is much shorter and tailored, and that makes me appreciate the serialization. But I think the Discovery, when he showed me Discovery, and I was like, we have to get CBS All Access or whatever. I was happy we did. You know, it was a really good show.
So, as we were saying, Matthew, you are a lifelong Star Trek fan. You are a Trekkie. Please tell us your experience with this franchise.
Well, I watched Next Generation on its original run, Deep Space Nine on its original run, Voyager's original run. The only one I didn't watch the original run was Enterprise, because it just always conflicted with my work schedule for like the 4 seasons or so it was on the air. And I have a weird thing with like Scott Bakula. I don't know. It just seemed strange to me to have the Quantum Leap guy as the captain. I don't know. Because I grew up with that show too. But yeah, I've been watching it for almost my entire life.
All the movies.
All the movies, Star Trek books. I had at one point probably like 90% of the books on my bookshelf were like Star Trek related books, like non-canon stuff and canon stuff, depending on what it was.
Did you ever try writing fan fiction?
I did not.
Okay. I'm always curious.
Yeah, no fan fiction.
You had to think about it.
I did.
That's a missed opportunity. Honestly, you should consider.
Maybe I'll go back. I can go back and reread some of those books.
Yeah.
And I mean, a lot of the books are non-canon, so a lot of the books were basically like glorified fan fiction because they're non-canon.
Yeah, for sure. So you've seen everything you said except for Enterprise.
Except for Enterprise, and I've only watched kind of some of the core episodes of the original series, like City on the Edge of Tomorrow, things like that. So I've seen City on the Edge of Forever. I'm gonna get yelled at. And so I've seen some of those, but yeah, most of my experience is the movies, and then Next Generation, Voyager, Deep Space Nine.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. So there's like, what, 7 shows? Like, there are so many Star Trek shows over the years, and then probably, what, a dozen movies? You know, like, there's a good chunk. So that's where I'll kind of come in with my Star Trek experience, which the reason why I wanted to have multiple guests on this is because my experience is next to none. I didn't grow up watching it. It wasn't until about college that a friend who was a Trekkie was like, I want to show all of you Wrath of Khan, especially because a lot of us in the friend group hadn't seen any Star Trek. So Wrath of Khan is often considered the best movie of all the Star Treks. I watched that. I kind of understood the fan base with it, but I think the longest time I was intimidated on where to start because there's so many shows, so many movies, what's connected to what. So I felt when you guys were both telling me how good Discovery was, I'm like, well, maybe this is a good point to just kind of jump in because it's an entirely new show that's only been out for a few years now. It's still on, and also because it's on CBS All Access, it has, less restrictions than something would if it were on actual television. And yeah, it's made me very interested in the whole Star Trek franchise as a whole, and want to maybe start dabbling in some Next Generation, start dabbling in some Deep Space Nine, possibly once I finish Discovery. But so that's all of our bases. Monica has seen some. She's kind of in the middle. Matt has seen just about everything. I've seen next to nothing. And so we have a few different bases before we get into this discussion of season 1 of Discovery. The first thing I really wanted to talk about with this season was the crazy ass first 2 episodes. Because it's on CBS All Access, they aren't confined to the commercial, having to be 42 minutes to fit into an hour. They all are about anywhere from 40 to 50 minutes. They're kind of flexible. But those first 2 episodes are crazy. And I'll give some bullet points. And yes, spoiler warning, if you haven't seen Discovery, check out season 1 on CBS All Access. I can't believe I'm plugging it, but I think if you're going to get it, it's worth it for Discovery. So, Michael Burnham, our main character, kills a Klingon torchbearer. This first episode ends with her having to do a mutiny on her captain, Georgiou, and then the Klingons arrive. And it's just like shit's hitting the fan right away. And it ends on a cliffhanger.
And more than that, Michael Burnham, the betrayal between Michael Burnham and Georgiou is so huge. They really reinforce somehow in the time that they have
the 40-minute
available,
episode.
They have the ability to build just how strong the relationship is between Georgiou and Michael. I think that it just goes to show what a huge dive this is in character. It's like they said, what is the direct polar opposite of this character that we've had this amount of time to establish, and flipped it on its head. Let's make them their own worst enemy.
Yeah.
And then make you sympathetic to them somehow.
Yeah. So that's where the first episode ends. We also see that Klingons are kind of forming sort of an alliance between clans and such. Episode 2 ends with Georgiou being killed, the kind of messiah T'Kuvma being killed from the Klingons, and then Michael is sentenced to life in prison for mutiny. So that's where episode 2 ends. It's like we show episode 1 where we kind of introduce to Saru and Georgiou and Michael. We think this is going to be the crew we're following, because every Star Trek show follows a crew. And then all this shit happens. And then just so that we know, episode 3 jumps 6 months. We're in the middle of a Klingon war. And it's like, what the fuck is going on this show? The pedals to the metal.
It's like, if you haven't seen this show and it's like, well, spoilers, Brandon, you're telling us the 2 main characters die? That is the breakneck speed that the show moves at. It's like you're at the top of a ladder and you're just falling down it, and it's just, but you somehow are able to follow. It did take me, I think, I watched it the first time with you, and I was admittedly for some reason with Star Trek, I have to kind of passively watch it, get the general details, and then kind of try it again. It just shows how much story they have to fall through.
Yeah.
And you're able to follow it well enough just because you're able to grab onto who these people are.
Yeah, and so one thing I'll say, and then I want to ask Matt about this, is, so in episode 3, like I said, it starts with, we jump 6 months forward from the previous 2 episodes' events, and Michael is picked up by Captain Lorca, played by Jason Isaacs, who, is often a villain character in things, and this is Discovery. This is the ship, because that threw me in the first episode, that the ship was Shenzhou. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, wait, the show is usually the name of the ship.
See, I don't know who Jason Isaacs is.
What he's
yeah,
from.
He's from
I know
the
he's
Patriot.
Yeah, he's the big villain in the Patriot. I love him in that.
Yeah.
Harry Potter films. He's
Malfoy's dad.
Yeah.
That's Malfoy's dad?
The long blonde hair, yeah.
Jason Isaacs just has one of these super angular villain faces. He's always a villain.
Resting villain face. He's got resting villain face. It's a diagnosable offense. So this is where we're introduced to the ship of Discovery. We see that Saru is on it. We see that Lorca's the captain, and that's where, to me, it felt like the first 2 episodes, and I actually looked up, it seemed like the writer said the same thing, that first 2 episodes are almost like a prologue, and then episode 3 is kind of the pilot, which is such an interesting way to look at storytelling in comparison to previous shows and previous Star Trek shows, I'm sure, where back in the day, usually you had to make a pilot had to get approved, and then you could do more. I think this show was just greenlit for 15 episodes, and therefore they're like, well, we don't need to introduce everything in the first episode. We can have shit go crazy and then be like, now episode 3, this is the show that you're watching. So when you were watching it the first time, Matt, I'm sure that this was way faster than other shows. A lot of action. The budget seems great on this show. So like, what were your first impression, you're watching these first episodes in comparison to all the other Star Treks you've watched?
When I first watched it, I was actually a little bit worried that they were following a bit more of the same thread of the J.J. Abrams movies, because I think they're very solid movies, but they're different spiritually from what the shows have historically done. So I was a little bit worried they were going to be going like very, very action heavy the entire time, where you have, Spock and Khan punching each other in the face on top of a shuttle flying through a city or whatever it was. And
well, they're starting with the Klingon War.
They're starting with the Klingon War, which is something that's been referenced many times in the series, but we've never really seen directly.
Okay, so that's why I was going to ask if any of the shows ever had a war with the Klingons.
Not directly involving the Federation. There was some stuff involving Klingon Wars in Deep Space Nine. There was always references to Klingon wars in Next Generation. By the time of Next Generation, Federation and Klingons were allies. In the original series, which takes place, on the timeline takes place after Discovery, there were still tensions between the Klingons and the Federation, but not a full-on war.
Interesting. So that's something I had no idea of. I figured one of the shows had to have covered some war time. So this is the first one that they jump into an actual war. And this is how the show is starting. And I just found it so crazy because, like I said, I thought Georgiou was going to be one of the main characters. I thought T'Kuvma was going to be a main character for the Klingons. And they're both killed in episode 2. And then episode 3, we introduce the entire new crew, where we introduce Tilly, we introduce Stamets, we introduce Lorca, Saru is back, and then that's where we kind of are introduced to the. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, and one thing I want to mention is that they're also introduced in a way where we're made to think that they're going to be important characters. Because so I'm going to spoil the pilots of Voyager and Deep Space Nine if anybody wants to skip my voice, but. At the beginning of Voyager, the ship is pulled across the galaxy by a being. The ship is whipped across the galaxy. A lot of crew members are killed.
Okay.
But the crew members that are killed are ones that either we never saw on screen, or ones that were only shown for a brief flash of a moment. Like the doctor, the ship's chief of medicine is killed, the ship's chief engineer is killed, the first officer is killed. But they're never characters that we really got a chance to know.
They don't have heavy dialogue. They're not introduced with a lot of like what Monica was bringing up earlier between the relationship of Georgiou and Michael is they clearly establish this is a almost, I don't want to say a mother-daughter relationship, but clearly a mentor, best friend, also mother relationship, all molded into one.
It's very maternal, yeah.
Yeah, and I think clearly Georgiou is grooming. She believes Michael will be a captain someday. It's not. I don't know if it's said precisely, but it's very heavily implied. And I'm like, okay, so that's where the show's going to go. At some point, she's going to take over Discovery or something. But I'm like, but this is Shenzhou. This is what is happening.
Yeah.
And the fact that by the end of the first episode, she has to betray Georgiou.
Yeah.
So I find it interesting that none of the other, some of the other pilots kind of start with some deaths and whatever, but nothing with such heavy implications. But also, I can see your point. I think the reason why a lot of people enjoyed the JJ movies is because, and I haven't seen them fully I've only read about them and heard. From what I understood was he took the love of Star Trek and kind of made it a more blockbuster / almost Star Wars like popcorn accessibility to it, opposed to Star Trek shows, which seem to have much more maybe either like political things or religious things or messages that are deeper and like there's more thought-provoking things. Whereas he's like, here, I'm going to give you a fun, entertaining 2 hours.
Yeah, like when you think of some of my favorite episodes and a lot of people's favorite episodes of Star Trek, they're episodes that feature almost no action. I think of the episode Duet on Deep Space Nine in the first season, where it's basically Major Kira and a Cardassian interrogating each other for an hour.
Debating ethics.
Debating ethics. One of the probably actually the first actual good Next Generation episode, which was season 2, The Measure of a Man, where it was doctors, if I can remember correctly, arguing over whether or not Data could basically be killed, so they could like analyze him, so they could study him and dissect him to find out what made it work, since Data is the only cyborg and or the only mechanical creature in the Federation.
Okay.
Where it's a lot more of like legal and ethical arguments about like, you know, what makes a human, what's right and wrong in the face of violence and danger in Deep Space Nine's case. Whereas JJ's were much more action focused. It was a lot less of that and a lot more, and I mean they're great for what they are. I think they're very fun films to watch, but they're very different than the shows.
I think he certainly was going for something that would make it digestible to try to pull in people like me who hadn't watched any shows. And I'm sure, you know, there are things of there I'll enjoy. But so the reason why I wanted to bring up the general craziness of the first couple episodes is to talk about how that plays a similar speed the whole season. There is no like, oh, those 2 episodes were crazy, and then it slows down and has filler episodes and has just a lot of like, it has character building and it has like arcs happening, but it's just so fast. And so like, for example, because, you know, I've finished the first season, I want to go back. I like, as a writer, like to see the pacing of things. So for example, Ash Tyler, who became the security officer, was introduced in episode 5, where he was a prisoner of war for the Klingons, introduced to Lorca. That's episode 5. And then by episode 7 is kissing and having a love interest story with Michael Burnham. And so it's like, that's only... And he also, in episode 5, I don't think even spoke to Michael, so that was all 6 and 7, just boom, 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 boom. Here's the thing, here we go.
Admittedly, though, episode 6 is the weird time travel.
7 is.
Oh, okay. So that's where they, quote-unquote, like, without you seeing, build a relationship, right?
Yeah.
Where
But
they
like,
have to, like, really trust each other and that kind of thing, right?
yeah, and like another thing, just to introduce the speed of the show, 3, we are introduced the monster, the tardigrade, where it's kind of like, it's like that episode towards the end becomes like a horror movie where they're on a ship with this monster and they're running from it. And then episode 4, they realize they can use it to make these basically teleportation jumps. And then that tardigrade also kills Landry, who's like a commanding officer for Lorca. And so that was like, to me, very like, which... You go ahead.
Thank God.
Yeah.
Fuck that bitch.
Yeah, I didn't like her. But yeah, she gets killed right away because she gets cocky and doesn't listen to Michael.
Bye.
But the fact that we introduced this monster in 3, and then by 4, they've already figured out how to make this device that I knew. I was like, well, this is going to play a factor for the rest of the season, if not the show, that they have the technology to teleport. And it's not just... warp or light speed. You know, it is like, we're gonna be here, boom, we're here. And I thought that was, I'm like, this is going so fast. And when I bring this up, I'm not saying it because I'm criticizing it. I'm just so used to plenty of television shows and even movies stretching things and taking their time. One of the reasons I can't stand, and this is a totally different franchise, but why I was getting really frustrated with like Green Arrow Arrow and The Flash is these 26 episode seasons. I'm like, dear God, this is taking forever. I don't care anymore. Whereas like, this is just like, we are going to make every episode matter. Every episode, either there's a death or a major plot point or consequences that will change for the rest of the season. So when you guys were watching Because Matt, I'll ask you, were you watching this like week to week when they were releasing it? Did you binge it?
We binged it when we first watched it. It was after season 1 had already finished.
Okay.
So I think we ended up watching it over the span of like a week or less.
Okay. So when you guys were watching it, were you just like, this is fucking nuts? I'm so
was
curious.
overwhelmed. I was overwhelmed for sure because of I think the Klingon portions I got lost.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I have a particular watch style, and especially when it's something big, I know I'm gonna have to watch it a couple times. So, I'll do it passively, and then I had to watch it again to really get it. And then I watched it a third time, and that's when I actually, I think the second time was the big buy-in, and then now I'm just like, I really, really enjoy it, and like, I can't criticize it. I don't know.
Yeah. So the pacing, just within like, we'll just say the first mid-season of those 9 episodes, like so much happens, and then we have the 4-episode arc in the second half of the season where they end up in the Terran separate universe, and then by the towards the end of that 4-episode arc, the big twist that Captain Lorca is from the Terran universe, is evil, was using Discovery this whole time, and was just trying to take over who in that universe was Emperor Georgiou. And I was like, wow, I thought this would be like a season 2 or season 3 finale big reveal. Didn't even make it to the first season finale. I'm pretty sure it happened around episode 12 to 13 of 15.
Yeah.
I'm like, what the fuck? Are you guys, were you afraid of not being picked up? And you're like, well, we're going to do as much shit as possible.
And again, it's like, regardless of who the listener is, whether you've seen the show or you haven't seen the show, if you haven't seen the show, we are spoiling a bunch, but it does not matter because there is so much packed into these episodes that A, you're probably going to forget, and B, like, there's so much.
Yeah. And for me, it was a big change because, especially the series that I grew up with, I mean, Deep Space Nine is the only one that became fully serialized, basically, by its later seasons. Not exactly week to week, but there's plot lines that get picked up that start in season 2 that don't finish until season 7.
Which one is this?
Deep Space Nine.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, there's extended plot. Deep Space Nine was the first of these series to really have like very extended plot lines, whereas you'd have every now and then a two tops maybe 3 off on like Next Generation, and then a couple of multi-parters on Voyager, but nothing that stretched throughout the entire season. Where Deep Space Nine, you have character arcs that stretch throughout all 7 seasons.
Sure.
But in between there, because they were broadcast network television in the 90s, there had to be a lot of filler episodes because they were doing about 28 episode seasons, I think, something like that.
Something. Usually they ask for anywhere from 23 to 28 episode seasons.
Yeah.
Which, if they're all 42 minutes, that's a lot of content, guys.
Yeah. So
that's
for
a lot of content.
For every, especially in the early seasons, like I have like an abridged Deep Space Nine season 1 watch list, which makes sure to focus on episodes like the pilot and then the episode Duet, which is the one that I mentioned with Major Kira interrogating the Cardassian. But then there's also in season 1 of Deep Space Nine an episode called Move Along Home, which is one of the worst episodes of the entire series, which literally has the crew playing hopscotch and singing.
Which I think we should watch that one right now. But no, I did also appreciate the fact that when they did the 4 episode arc of them being in the Terran universe, that they didn't rush getting back to normal time. They did make 4 episodes out of it, but a lot happened in those 4 episodes. A lot of character work. That's where they fully reveal that Tyler had Volk.
Parasite.
Volk inserted into him and was Klingon, basically, and that the Lorca twist, and that Michael had to obviously deal with the emotional struggle of seeing Terran Georgiou, who she watched her Georgiou die, and just to see this terrible version who's an emperor and a murderer, and then just juggle with the fact that they want to get home, and there's a lot going on, but it they had a great juxtaposition of taking their time, but also giving you a lot to digest and a lot to process. And so I loved that. And also, to me, one of the most shocking deaths, because it was so sudden, was when Tyler kills Dr. Culber. That was very, like, holy fuck.
Yeah.
Like, I think I was watching it with you, Monica, and I went,
I know.
I did a legit, like, not exaggerated, I gasped, because I was thinking for a brief second, I was like, wait, that's not Taron Culber, that's real Culber, This is not a dream sequence, he's dead, what the fuck?
And more significantly, this isn't Star Trek. Like, you know what I mean? Like, the traditional Star Trek, I'm not sure that they would have done something that extreme.
Well, no, there's like jokes on Family Guy and stuff with like, you know, the whole idea of the red shirt was because in the original series, Gold used to be command, Red was security. They've switched those around in the more recent season, in the more recent series, or in the series following the original series, I should say. And then, you know, you have Blue for medical and whatnot. But the idea of a red shirt was like, you know, like the away team will consist of Spock, Kirk, McCoy, and Ensign Ricky. And Ricky's just like, crap.
Yeah, it's which that was one of the few things I knew about Star Trek lore was that red shirts die. Yeah, you know, but they were always meaningless characters.
But your main characters are invincible. They get
Whereas like this show,
it's season 7 Game of Thrones.
But yeah, exactly. It's more than that. It's not just like are they the right color or whatever. It's the Star Trek characters aren't capable of committing something like that. Like, right? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's not something that they would normally do.
Snapping someone's neck?
Yeah. Like,
that was very, like, holy shit.
Yeah, I mean, Deep Space Nine was one of the first series to kill off... Well, I mean, they killed off a main character in Deep Space Nine. They killed off a main character in the very early in Next Generation because she wanted out of her contract.
Right, but killing her off by fucking beheading her?
There was nothing with that visceral, like... He pops up and snaps his neck. Yeah, it's nothing like that. It's like
it's always yes, I conspired and poisoned this person.
It's slow paced and like the person gets a chance to like
calculating.
The person gets a chance to like say a proper goodbye usually and stuff like that.
Or monologue maybe.
They get to monologue. Whereas this, no, he's standing there and then he just snaps his neck and he's dead.
He's dead, and I think it was very shocking because. Like most people, I loved Culber. You know, I think they did a great job writing.
He's so sweet.
I think the actor was incredible. I loved the relationship of him and Stamets. I think it was very genuine.
His smile. He has such a sweet face. I just want to pinch his cheeks and make him a sandwich.
And I think they knew that killing a character like that would be the most gut-wrenching. Like, the only other people who may be just as or more gut-wrenching would be, like, Tilly or Saru. You know, people who are objectively just good people.
They're part of the gang.
And they're usually, like, they get comedic things. They're people you like, actors you like, and Culber was like that. He was very, very likable. There's almost no bad qualities to him.
Yeah, and one thing I'll even add, that's the only like actual. I mean, yes, there's that like love arc between Tyler and Michael, but Stamets and Culber's like it's the only actual relationship we see on the show.
Yeah, that is the one like love.
Yeah, it's the love story. It's it's the only love story we actually see on the show. Like the stable relationship, and it's like. The only time we actually get to see Stamets behave like in a human, because Stamets is like, he's incredibly intelligent. He's like, you know, he's very standoffish when he's working. The most human moments you get with him are the moments that he's with his husband.
He's in his quarters with his husband, and there's usually they're like brushing their teeth and having a talk. And I felt very connected to that. I forgot, like you said, it's really the only love story. And also, what I liked about it is it wasn't a love story that developed. They were already together when they're introduced, and it's just we're in their love, and like there is conflicts or arguments, but for the most part, you both know that both people love them. There's no cheating happening. There's no love triangle. There's no conflict of that sort. They just are in love, and he's a sweet character. And to see him go in such a aggressive fashion, I think that was the best way to show that the Klingon part of Tyler was not fucking around.
This is like point number 748 of like why this show is doing something about diversity and not being woo-woo about it.
Yeah, which now that like we've kind of covered the season, that's one thing I wanted to talk about was overall the diversity on the show. I
really think that the relationship between those two, the main love story you're getting isn't a heteronormative story. It's between two scientists who are both male, and they are just very different, and I don't know, it's just everything, every layer that they add with the whole diversity thing is just, and they're breaking so many. Go ahead.
One thing I think about it, I mean, it's kind of almost counterintuitive that we're calling attention to it, but we have to call attention to it. But it's like one of the things that makes it...
Because they do it so effortlessly.
Well, that's one of the things that makes it so effective, is because most shows, especially in history, most shows, if they had a gay couple, it would basically be the entire episode arcs would basically being like them sitting there with a twirling baton being like, hey, look at this gay couple here, we have a gay couple here, and just like making such a huge deal out of it, whereas this is just treated like a regular...
Well, look at Star Wars with the it wasn't even manufactured outrage, it was like manufactured like Twitter traffic or whatever when they had the first gay kiss on Star Wars or whatever.
So I was just going to bring that up. So in the newest trilogy of Star Wars movies, a lot of people wanted Jason Isaacs' character and John Boyega, I believe are their names, to be Finn and Poe, to be a love story.
Sorry, Oscar Isaac.
Jason Isaac.
I'm thinking of Jason Isaacs for Lorca. Oscar Isaac. Thank you. A lot of people wanted them to be a relationship, which I thought would have been a great payoff for where those characters were introduced in the first movie. By the third movie, to have them be in love and to have a gay biracial relationship in a heavy, over 40-year-long franchise. Mm-hmm. They didn't do it. The only sort of gay representation they gave was literally two background pilot women kissing as the camera panned by. And it's as if Disney or JJ and all those people probably wanted praise for doing that. Mm-hmm. When Star Trek Discovery in particular, and I'm not sure if this is the first time in Star Trek history, but they have a biracial gay couple that there is no coming out story. There is no, we're gay, da-da-da-da-da. It is
How are we going to break it to the rest of the crew?
Yeah.
And it's our kids.
It's not a big deal. They're just together, and the fans have to deal with it, whether they have a problem with that or not. And I loved that, because we have to bring attention to it, because it's like, this is how it should be done.
Yeah. There's, so you mentioned like the first time in Star Trek history, so they did try to do things with this, especially on Deep Space Nine. But they were told, at times they were told to tone it down. So the character of Garak, who's one of my favorites on Deep Space Nine, in the first season, he's played much more of like a kind of in a bisexual way. And Paramount actually like told them that he had to tone it down and make him more like overtly heterosexual, to the point where he eventually was like in a relationship with a female character.
Of course.
But they, like in the Deep Space Nine documentary, they talked about how they specifically wanted to play him as more of a bisexual character and were told to tone it down by the studio. And then Deep Space Nine also has, it's got to be one of the first, if not the first, like primetime broadcast television appearances of two women like passionately kissing each other. Mm-hmm. And the way they kind of stepped around a little bit was there's a character, Jadzia, in Deep Space Nine, and the way that they kind of walked around it is she's a Trill, and Trills had like go from host to host. So
basically a worm inside of a
it was basically like she had met up with a former host that had used to be in a different body, so they had been married when they were in a normal heterosexual relationship.
Of course.
Now they were both women, but they were still in love with each other, and then they kissed at one point in the series.
See, that's the thing. It's like they could do a thing, but then they have to justify it by some other thing.
Yes.
Whereas like Discovery and not to the fault of those, like you said, clearly they were trying to do it, but executives and higher powers shot them down or told them to tone it down.
Yeah.
I loved how Discovery was able to do this because it's so important, and I think that there was a lot of controversy the time we're recording this. Right around Christmas, Happiest Season came out on Hulu, which was about a lesbian couple, and it was a coming out story. And in the LGBTQ community, there's a lot of people that were upset that it was another movie or show with a coming out story. And so, like, because they're like, guys, there's more to us than that. And so I liked how in Discovery, at no point was it a big deal. It was just part of the worth, and no crew members made snide comments. No one, there was no like a woman interested in a man. It's like, oh, I'm gay. Oh, you are? You don't seem gay. Like there's no weird things. It's just
made
that
it real.
way. It made it real.
It made the whole not making a thing. It made it real.
Exactly, and
that's what we need right now.
That's what we need. And so the next point I wanted to bring up was also, they're not in your face about just the general diversity when it comes to women on the show.
I mean, we haven't even mentioned, and again, it's, if you have no idea, when we talk about Michael Burnham, that's actually a woman.
Yes.
Michael Burnham is a woman, and she is a strong-ass black woman who is smart as fuck, and you will never question whether she is right or not.
Yeah. I hope I'm pronouncing this right, but she's played by Sonequa Martin Green, who the writing for her character and her acting
it's like they wrote a story for they named them Philip Georgiou and Michael Burnham, wrote the whole fucking script and said, all right, swap the genders, we're going with it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it became Philippa Georgiou and Michael Burnham.
And the fact that they kept how interesting is that?
Yeah, and that is one of the Star Trek legacies. Back in the original series, having a black bridge officer with Uhura. I think the original series had the first interracial kiss on TV.
It did
with Uhura.
I remember hearing about that with Shatner.
Yeah, exactly. And then with Deep Space Nine, you had Next Generation, you had prominent female characters, but they were still in caregiver positions, the doctor, the ship's counselor, stuff like that.
Sure.
Whereas Deep Space Nine first, and then Voyager, Deep Space Nine had Major Kira, who is a badass terrorist. I remember reading an interview one time with Nana Visitor when she said she drove to her audition blasting DMX in her car to get in the mood of playing that character because she's just a badass.
Yeah. I think the one thing I realized, especially towards the end of the season, I was looking at, most of Star Trek is the main, what do they call it, where the captain's chair is the main deck, you will.
The bridge?
Yeah, the main bridge. I'm looking at the cast, the two, we'll say the pilots, both women, one white woman, one black woman. We have a robot who's over here that's clearly, I think, played by a female actress. Yep. Mm-hmm. We have a black communications officer. Saru, played by Doug Jones, is a Kelpian.
Mm-hmm. Not even human.
Not even human.
But he is played by a white man in weird stilettos. So that's got to count for something, right?
Yeah. Michael is obviously a black woman at the beginning. Georgiou, an Asian woman. There's also an Asian man who is one of the crew people on the main bridge as well. I think he's in weapons. Tyler, I believe, is a person of color. He's
Egyptian IRL, but I don't know what he is.
Yeah, but that was the thing I was looking at. I'm besides Lorca and then, Stamets, but he's not on the bridge.
Well, and he's also, fucking albino or some shit? I don't know.
But Lorca, I'm he's the only white man, and then he becomes evil and is killed.
Yeah.
What were you going to say?
Oh, nothing. Yeah, I thought of something incorrectly.
So yeah, and Tilly, a woman, and then Stamets and Culber, who were both men, but they were a biracial, homosexual couple. And so I was looking at the show. I was like, yeah, I am loving this because it feels diverse without it being hey, look over here. We have a very diverse cast. Lots of strong women.
One thing I wanted to mention, just all of the little, like, kind of nerdy shout-outs in Hidden Discovery also, that the name Stamets is the name of a famous mycologist that lives today.
Oh, okay.
They named it Paul Stamets. The character is named after Paul Stamets, the mycologist, who is a famous mushroom expert.
Interesting. Did not know that. So yeah, I just think that this show, they're able to do these things without it being a big deal. And the fact that it's... One moment that recently came out in movies, and we've kind of talked about, the three of us, is the moment in Avengers Endgame where they throw all the female heroes for one particular scene, and it feels very just like, look at all the women we have. They're badass, strong women. You see? They're all right here. They're all right in a row. They're all in the same shot.
Can you hear the music? It's swelling just like your heart.
It reminds me of South Park, the Strong Woman episode.
Yeah, exactly.
Which, you know, to be fair, I look at that moment and I'm like, well, this means a lot to little girls out there, you know, watching that. But like,
that's fine. That's fine. But don't tell me, a grown ass 30-something-year-old woman, to like be like, you know what, Disney, you're doing it.
Yeah,
you finally got around.
Exactly. Even though so many of these movies star men, and like the main woman is usually a love interest, so that's where you look at comparison of big, heavy franchises, or even Star Wars, for example. You know, Rey, they tried to make a strong female character, but the problem is a lot of people complained that she was a Mary Sue character. She was too perfect. She had no flaws, and da-da-da-da-da. And like everyone in the cast, especially the main cast, feels like well-rounded characters that have arcs, that have emotions. None of them are perfect by any means. I mean, just the fact that Michael Burnham starts the series having to do a mutiny to her best friend / mentor, and then starts a war.
Yeah, they're drivers of the plot.
Yeah, and she has to take the entire series to try to make up for that mistake. And she has to use her brains and her heart and her strength, and she makes plenty of mistakes along the way. She is not perfect, and they never shove it in your face. And I think it was like Joss Whedon that said once that, like, they're like, oh, why do you write strong female characters? He's just like, because the fact that we have to say strong female characters, like, why can't they just be strong characters? You know? Why does it have to be that?
Yeah.
And he's like, until we stop asking that, that's why I'm going to keep doing this. And I think that's something that Discovery did so well in so many forms, is show Michael and Georgiou, and like, I love just the overall arc of Tilly. You know, she's a very timid and nervous character who uses her brains and speaks up for herself and helps, being very crucial by the end of the season to help save the day.
And she's quirky. She's a redhead. She's curvy. She's not what, you know, her archetype is like, I've disappointed my family. Like, I've never been good enough for my mom, and this is who I am, and take me as I come.
Yeah.
And thank God you do, because she's fucking amazing.
Yeah, and she says, I think in one of her first scenes, like, that she wants to be accepted into the captain program someday. And I like the arc that they take throughout the season with her character, and we'll talk about some of the characters, where she starts to gain more confidence, and Michael starts to bond with her, with their relationship, and friendship-wise. And also, like you were saying, she's an attractive, curvy woman, and who's not like a sex symbol, which that's one thing. I remember there's a scene, it was in a trailer of one of the JJ movies, where I think it was, I can't remember the actress's name, but there's a quick shot where she's like in her underwear. And it's for like a quick second. And I remember a lot of people even said, like, really, JJ, do we need... Do we need this?
Yeah, it was in the Wrath of Khan remake where it was just there was no point into her being there. She just was like the male gaze like peering around.
Yeah, which I think someone even pointed out to me who had seen the full movie. They're like, yeah, that serves no like character development or plot point. It's literally we have an attractive actress. We wanted to put her in as little clothes as possible.
Yeah.
For a quick second, almost as if so they could put it in the trailer.
Yeah.
And while the show has a love story with Michael and Tyler, there's never overt, sexual. They don't sexualize the women. They don't use these attractive actresses just because they're attractive. Let's look at their bodies. Look at them. It's always about the plot. It's about the action. It's about the character moments. It's just, I don't know. I think it's so well done.
Yeah, there's actually so there was only one character on Next Generation that wasn't wearing a uniform. It was always Marina Sirtis, Counselor Troy, was basically always in a catsuit. And that was because the producers wanted her to be like the sex symbol of the show, so she always had this plunging neck like V-neck catsuit on.
Of course,
they actually worked. Because Next Generation came on the air, I believe, in 87 or 88, and it went off the air in the mid-90s. And, opinions had already started changing by the mid-90s. They actually worked her change into the show, where a different captain took over for a brief arc, and was like, I want officers on my bridge to wear real uniforms. And so he made her change clothes, and then for the rest of the series, she was like, I like wearing a uniform.
Nice.
Yeah.
So, one thing I will have to say, which was historic, was we did see Klingon titties. We did see Klingon titties.
So there were lots of respectable women, but we did get to see the first canon titty. And that is truly...
the canon Klingon titty.
We've seen a lot of Klingon cleavage before in Next Generation, but never a full-on Klingon titty.
How many Star Trek fans were
Enya
yes, what I've been drawing in my notebooks is true.
Enya is queued up right now. Klingon titties.
Yeah, so I think that's just one thing I really wanted to bring up. Of what I saw, at least with this first season, was the respectability of the diversity of women, of just generally with the writing, for everyone. It was not any of the cliches that other shows have problems with. Game of Thrones was a big show that had to really just tits, violence, So if you wanted to talk about what you were just saying as far as other shows in the past were trying to be, forward with their thinking, but then Paramount was like, no, we need sexiness.
Yeah, well, Voyager especially, they deliberately flipped it, so you had women characters in positions that were normally held by men historically in the series, and then men that were in positions that had historically been held by women. So you had, a male doctor, a woman captain, a woman chief engineer in Voyager. So it was just kind of trying to put women in it was showing them in a position that just the shows hadn't historically shown them in. But then I think it was around season 3 of Voyager, maybe season 4, where Paramount said, you don't have any sex symbols in this show, so let's bring in Jerry Ryan in a skin-tight metallic catsuit in high heels, to an outfit that Jerry Ryan herself has said it made it hard for her to breathe. It made there was a lot of stress with the cast, but it's because Paramount was like, this show needs a sex symbol.
Of course. Always need a sex symbol. So we've been talking about a lot of the season, a lot of the twists, the arcs, the Klingon titties. With this show, I'd love to hear who is your guys's... did you have a favorite character or a favorite arc that stuck out? I'll start. My favorite was I loved the character of Saru.
He grew so much.
He grew so much.
He went from being this annoying, you want to be oh, look at this annoying toady, basically, what the fuck is he?
Well, yeah, I remember I didn't like him in the first episode or so because he starts off
I did warn you, though.
Yeah, Kelpians have basically these little tentacles that kind of come out of their head that when they're
ganglia.
With is it for danger, right?
They can smell, they can sense death.
Yeah, death and extreme danger. And I was like, oh, is this just going to be the guy that's always complaining? You know, because most dramas and shows, you know, not just Star Trek, have a complaining
that
character.
Would be like Odo or like Data, right? Did he?
No, were Odo and Data were more like fish out of water type characters, where it's like they were both very alien to the world, and people had to explain a lot of things to them. I'd say like a complaining character.
No, I don't know. Odo was always very like on guard. He was he was very vigilant because I know he's the security, but that's kind of what I'm reacting to.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking more of like kind of like whiny kind of complainy characters that are always like, but wait a minute, we should blah 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 blah.
Exactly, and that's what I afraid he was going to be. I was like, oh, so Michael and Georgiou are going to be the badasses, and then Saru's going to be like, well, actually, and like he's going to be really annoying. And then pretty soon we learned that that's like the arc of his character is to both like he had to earn trust back with Michael after the betrayal of Georgiou because he was on Shenzhou with her, and to kind of start taking the role as captain and know that like there are risks and death is a possibility, but they're at war and you can't just run from everything. And I thought an episode that it actually took until after I went back and thought about it. There's an episode where him, Tyler, and Michael are on this planet for like some sort of research. I can't remember the exact details, but basically he gets kind of almost brainwashed by the planet and he attacks them because he wants to stay. And at the end of the episode, there's this moment, he's like, you know, for the first time in my life, I was at peace and like I wasn't afraid. And I was like, oh my God, I feel for this character. And then to see where he ends up towards the end of season 1, I was just like, I want him to be the captain. You know, I love him. I love Doug Jones's portrayal as him. I love how he was written throughout the season to build to where he got to be at the end. So, was there... I mean, how did you guys feel about Michael? You know, as obviously she starts this war and by the end of the season helps put the war at ease. I mean, what did you guys think of her character or Lorca or...
I really like Michael Burnham. Like, I don't even know where to start with Michael because I think that her character showed me that there's pretty much no such thing as a lose-lose situation. She somehow always is able to navigate a situation to become a win. And that's in like insane ways, and I don't know, it takes a lot of strategic know-how and whatnot, and science know-how that obviously I know it's written. It's just that I like that portrayal of someone. And she's
a very clearly a deeply flawed character. Like she's
emotional.
Yeah, she's always she's always trying to do what she thinks is the best thing in the moment, but you know she's not she does let her emotions get in the way. She does let her anger get in the way. Like you can see those moments where she's going through, and she's Sonequa Martin Green plays her so well, but she's also just this deeply flawed main character.
Well, something we actually haven't said, which I found interesting for her backstory, is she was raised, she was adopted by a human mom, and then Sarek, Spock's dad, so a Vulcan. So she was raised kind of like almost to be a Vulcan, even though she's human.
Yeah.
So she is...
and she's obviously... She was orphaned by like a Klingon attack.
Yeah, a Klingon attack that killed her family, and I think it was very interesting to see how Vulcans, from what I understood, because I didn't fully know that except for like maybe Wrath of Khan, that they're kind of emotionless.
Yeah.
And so she's raised to be that way, but she has emotion. She's a human.
Yeah.
And she's constantly struggled with that.
They're not they're not emotionless, but they're trained to always... Like they're like that. It's basically like stoicism, and it's like purest form. So like they have emotions, but they never show them. They never let it impact their thinking. At least that's the Vulcan ideal.
Yeah, definitely. And so I found that very interesting for the writing of her character was she was constantly at adversity and having to fight authority because it's seeming like, oh, well, it can only go this way. And she's like, no, I think there's another way, like you were saying. Like, that's not always lose-lose. Oh, did you have a favorite character?
Actually, I would say Lorca, and part of it I would say facetiously because Jason Isaacs eventually ended up being a villain, and Jason Isaacs not being a villain is like watching a Sean Bean movie without getting a death scene. So, so I just like the fact that that Lorca ended up being a villain and fulfilling my expectations there. But I also just think he was played very well. Like Monica had pointed out to me some of the small details that she saw with like some of the stuff that he would do on his monitor on like a second watch through, where he would like deliberately enter in like incorrect information or something like that. But he was also like, it made sense in the story why his character behaved the way he did when they had his whole story arc about how, you know, he lost his ship and his eyes were damaged and that's why he needed these eye drops and small details like that.
In the first watch through, I did not catch the way that he would deliver certain lines or how the music would change to like where you know, when you're not suspecting this whole storyline, it's just like he's a powerful man, and for some reason it's intense, but then actually the music is telling you he's fucking evil.
It's an ominous undertone.
Yeah, it's always like, his... I've been hearing this word a lot lately because I've been listening to some music theory stuff about leitmotifs and characters, and his is like a very dark, ominous... His is very dark and ominous anytime he's on screen. It doesn't really mesh with... him being a Federation captain.
Yeah, well, and I think, like you were saying, like the first time you watched it, you didn't quite sense it. I was like suspicious because, like you said, it's Jason Isaac.
I loved watching you see that
resting villain
like,
face.
React to that.
And well, because like he's introduced in episode 3. And the episode 3 ends where, like, they just escaped getting away from the tardigrade. It's like, oh my god, that shit was intense. And then sure enough cuts to him and Landry, and he's like, do you have the, you know, the whatever? And she's like, yep. And it shows that, like, he caught the tardigrade. So, like, his first episode, it shows that, like, he's hiding things. And I did not know the level of which he was going to be hiding things. But what's so fascinating is now that we know he ends up as Terran Lorca, it makes me want to someday, once I finish seasons 2 and 3 and whatever, by the time I get there, go back and notice all the little things that you noticed, where it was just like him saying things and acting a little differently, because it will probably make sense. Mm-hmm. And I don't want spoilers on seasons 2 or 3 yet, but I'm still curious, like, is their universe Lorca alive? And if so, where is he? It makes me really curious.
Yeah.
Because little things that I would notice is when he would sleep with the one admiral, I can't remember her name.
Would they sleep together?
They did.
There's one episode where they slept
right, yeah.
together. She's just like, you're acting different. And then like he does something to kind of betray her. Mm-hmm. And when she kept saying you're different, I'm like, all right, either he's scarred and he's different, or like something's going on with him. Mm-hmm. It was very, very interesting. I did not know it would be that kind of a heavy series-altering twist, because he was the captain of Discovery. That's the thing. He wasn't just a security officer or a head or a commander. He was the captain. Mm-hmm. Which, the only other thing I also want to just touch on is the stuff with Tyler, because I kept thinking, I'm like, there's something fucking up with this guy. The reason why is because he was written to be such... he's introduced as a prisoner of war, so you obviously feel for him for the torture and everything. The torture and everything.
He's a Trojan horse, is what he is.
Yeah, and then just the fact that he goes right into a love story with Michael, and he's a security officer. And he is he's heroic, he's attractive, even Tilly's just like, oh my god, look at him, you know. He's like so perfect. He's perfect, he's kind, he's smart, he's badass, he's all the things. I'm like, all right, he's either a fucking Klingon, or he's evil in some way, or like he works for the Klingons, or like something, because he just seems too perfect. Or my only other guess when I was watching it was they're setting him up to be so great so that when he dies, much like they did with Culber, it'll be heartbreaking. But the fact that he's the one that kills Culber, I was just like, oh, fuck, what the fuck?
You effectively lose both of them at the same time.
It's one moment that changes so much. And so I guess I was curious, when you guys were watching, did you pick up anything for the Tyler storyline? How he was introduced in episode 5 and then is featured so heavily?
Yeah, I'm thinking of, like, I rewatched that episode because that was also the episode that introduces Mudd, who is a character from the original series. Rainn Wilson plays, Fenton Mudd in the prison with them. And no, I don't really think there was anything, like, when I rewatched that episode, I don't think there was anything that really, like, jumped out to me, other than the fact that he was, like, still alive and the Klingons should have killed him by this point. Other than, but they explain that away by saying, like, he had become like the favorite, like, sexual toy of the woman Klingon. L'Rell, thank you.
Yeah.
AKA Klingon titties.
Which I was really, because I didn't know anything about Klingons, I was like, did she impregnate Tyler? That was a theory I had, because I was like, I don't know how their bodily functions work.
Yeah. She has an ovipositor,
Well, like, seahorses, the male gets pregnant, so I'm like, I don't know how this works. So that was my theory, was like he had a Klingon baby in him.
I was thinking that maybe it was like it was like PTSD, that like it was like he had been, like, that's what I was thinking, I think, with his character, that it was like PTSD from, like, him being tortured in prison or him getting raped by L'Rell.
Sure.
And so it turned out to be very different than, like, I had some ideas, but it was not what I thought it was going to be.
And something else that I think is progressive about that choice is that wasn't like a female damsel in distress character. The person dealing with PTSD like that is a man and is the security officer.
Yeah.
So they didn't give something like that to a woman who she was captured and she's forever, like, kind of, like, changed. Like, they didn't do, like Sansa Stark, who, like, for a long time was a victim.
Yeah.
It's like the man was like that. And then, like, Saru was afraid. It's like they make the men either evil or, like, a little bit more victimized, whereas, like, the women are the ones that are...
I would just say that all characters have their flaws.
Yes.
Like every character, I'd say, like, I mean, some of them are definitely more flawed than others, like Lorca being actually an evil, like, Terran infiltrator. But, like, Stamets is a flawed character. You see, like, how robotic he gets with his work, and how
he dismisses Tilly sometimes in the beginning.
Yeah, how he's so dismissive as a workaholic. I can empathize with that, but, like, how much like, non-human that he acts when he's working versus, like, those more human moments we get with him with Culber. But just all of the characters, like, they're all realistically flawed in some way.
Yeah, and
they're all I think that's one of the things that makes these characters so strong, is none of them are one-dimensional. Even the more minor characters, like Rika Sharma's character, the security officer that gets killed by the tardigrade, like, she's, I think, as close to, like, a one-dimensional character as there is.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still, like, obviously somebody like that is going to gravitate to somebody like Lorca.
Yeah. And I think, it's just the characters are so well-rounded. And I think the reason why the show has been hitting me in such a way is because this is very rare for television to just be hitting so many things on so many fronts. Much less a show that I never thought I'd really watch, because I'm like, I'm not going to get CBS All Access. Anyway, I know we've talked about a lot of different things in season 1. Did you guys have, for the season, any final thoughts or things that we didn't touch on, whether it was moments or characters or general thoughts?
I thought there was so one of the things that I really enjoyed was just every now and then you would see, like, that they kind of, this was a very difficult series for them to write, I think, because this takes place on the timeline in between Enterprise and the next generation, Enterprise in the original series. Mm-hmm. In terms of the Star Trek timeline, they had already said it was going to be set in kind of like the main universe, not like the J.J. Abrams universe. So there's a half a century worth of canon for them to try to figure out. Every now and then I would just catch like little glimpses here, like they mentioned like Captain Jonathan Archer, who is the captain of in the Enterprise series. They referenced him in one episode. They had Fenton Mudd, Harcourt Fenton Mudd, I think his name is, Rainn Wilson's character. They made some references. They made some like references to like episodes of Deep Space Nine. Like one of the funniest episodes of Deep Space Nine is called The House of Quark, and it references this ancient Klingon house called Dagor. And one of the Klingons, when they're going through like the Klingon roll call, when the Klingon houses are coming in, one of the Klingons is from the House of Dagor.
So they're definitely like clearly Trekkies wrote this show.
Yes.
But that was one of the things I'd seen when I was trying to see like what are people criticizing this show for, and it's like clearly this show is written by people that don't know Star Trek. So I just really didn't know if that was true, but from watching it with you, I feel like that's not the case.
No, I feel like they did as much as they could to like kind of stick within, like I said, 50 years worth of canon, which also doesn't, like, that 50 years of canon doesn't already, there's a lot of conflicts within that canon. It's already a mess. It's already a mess. When you go back to and watch to like Next Generation, like nobody remembers that technically Federation ships aren't supposed to go faster than like Warp 5, I think it is, because it tears apart the galaxy, which was an episode of Next Generation, because like after like 6 episodes, they're like, this is stupid. They just stopped doing it.
Yeah,
it doesn't serve us.
It doesn't serve us. So it was never a thing on Deep Space Nine or Voyager that you're not supposed to go fast than like the Federation speed limit for warp speed or whatever it was in that episode of Next Generation.
Yeah, well, I compared Star Trek to comic books because I feel like they've both been around for like 50, 70, 80. They've both been around a pretty similar length of time, and they're both messy with their continuities, and I think that's why for a long time I was confused on where to start, what to watch. Are things gonna be confusing, not add up? But this show clearly, from a Trekkie perspective, did the best they could, and
navigated it well.
Navigated it well. Yeah,
and is also, from someone like me who is the least Trek fan in this room, I think it's just a fantastic television show that like you don't need to be I would say I didn't need to be a Trek fan in any way to enjoy this. There was nothing that was confusing. There was nothing that I was like, oh, I feel lost. Some people are worried with the Marvel movies or Star Wars, like, will things not add up? Will I be confused? If you start with Discovery, you'll be fine and you'll have fun.
Yeah. Like if people want to say things that like, oh, this doesn't make sense in Discovery, but one of your favorite episodes of Next Generation is, I think it was The Visitors. It was the one where they find 2 survivors left on a planet that had just been exterminated. They don't know. They eventually find out what's going on. It turns out that the woman is actually dead, and the man is actually a superhuman, like a almost omnipotent creature called a Dowd. And he's just projecting her as though she's still alive. But then he says that he got his revenge by he's like, I killed the entire species that attacked us. They were like, oh, you blew up the ship? No, I killed them all 500 billion of them, all wiped out in a second. And then we never hear about the Husnak again, so it's like, that was the name of the species that had attacked the planet, and it's like, so you're telling me like 500 billion people in the galaxy in your Federation space just vanished, and then everybody was like, oh,
moving on.
Next week.
Well, time for lunch.
Time for hopscotch.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, as someone who's you've interacted with some movies, some shows, like
I'm not really somebody that's like a fan. I'm not a fanatic in anything. I'm a fanatic over my knives. I like bikes. I'm that kind of a nerd, but I'm not a huge like
pop culture.
Like, I don't have any sort of allegiance. And I have a lot of fun when I watch this show, and it's thought-provoking and sensitive, and it touches all the right things where I don't feel it gets preachy or weird at any points. And There was one moment in this latest season, but I'm not going to get into that.
Yeah, we'll just have to meet again for season 2 and like eventually season 3 chat.
Yeah.
I do need to correct myself. The name of that episode was The Survivors. I just need to defend my Trek cred. Because there's a lot of episodes that start with the something. The Visitor was an episode of Deep Space Nine. The Survivors was the episode of Next Generation I was referring to. I knew I had it wrong, and it was driving me nuts.
Well, thank God.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, it's been a pleasure talking about the show.
Keep watching. I've been still loving the series.
Yeah.
Well,
watch it, and don't even stress about having heard this because you're gonna have a good time.
Yeah. So, I guess one thing I'll ask you guys, because you've seen seasons 2. Is season 3 done?
It just finished.
We're about to watch the last episode.
Okay. So, as far as like season 2 and almost all of season 3, would you say that the quality has stayed consistent?
It's improved. Season 3
improved.
is season
Wow.
season 3.
Well, fuck me. I just
season-
came this entire episode about how season 1's so good.
Season 3 has been my favorite, actually.
Jesus Christ. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I agree. I know we spoiled a lot. If you have any thoughts about watching
It does
the show,
not slow down. Just keep watching.
it doesn't slow down. Just watch it. It's so much fun. If you know spoilers, whatever, just there's so much that we didn't cover, even though we covered a lot for the last hour. But thank you guys so much for coming on the podcast. And we'll have to chat again for season 2.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.